This is a huge pleasure to do this with you.
Same here.
It's a huge honor. And one of the things, just when I was reading about your background, is you've been an investor in a lot of the most successful companies, I think. Warby Parker, Dropbox, Lyft, and Uber. And you were one of the only people the only person to invest in both?
You got a couple people now who's
But like in the early days?
In the early days, yes.
So what I want to know is, which do you use? Like when you go downstairs and you need a car, which one do you use?
You know what, Travis isn't the CEO anymore, so he can't kill me. I use Lyft.
Really? Wow, you guys...
Travis can't kill me now.
Is this... why? It's out of curiosity.
Which one do you use?
I'm a creature of habit.
Yeah,
so
you got a car, so you got private cars.
Well, I use Uber too, but that may have been the single. I don't have many regrets over things that I missed, but that may have been. I had a chance at Uber early, and I'm like, I'm not investing in a car company at a $200 million valuation, but. I know. It hurts still.
No,
Me too. They're groaning. You didn't miss it at $200 million.
I almost missed it too, to be honest. And like when I first got the call about it, a good buddy of mine, Shervin Pishavar.
Yeah.
And Shervin and I were talking about some investments, and actually Shervin introduced me to the Warby Parker guys early, and we met at Summit Series. Yeah. Shervin and I met at Summit Series. We were just talking about Summit, and he introduced me to the Warby Parker guys, and he was telling me about Uber. And he put me on the phone with Travis, and this is right after the San Francisco launch. And I thought the CapEx expenses of buying, 1 million cars, I had no idea the business model, so I thought it was stupid. And lucky enough, Shervin convinced me to do it. You
got over your objection.
Yeah, you know what, Travis is, as polarizing as he may be to some people, I just think he was so clear on the vision from the very beginning of what it was and what it was going to be. And I think it was infectious.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. So the thing I want to ask you is, you've been amazing at being an investor, and you've been amazing at spotting talent in the music industry. Talk a little bit about the similarities and differences in spotting talent before they're discovered in both of those fields.
It's a lot of similarities. I think you'd be able to manage pop stars too, by the way. And because I think it kind of boils down to more than picking companies, can you pick people? Yeah. And it's the same exact thing with artists. There's a lot of people. You can walk into any church in Harlem and probably hear girls who can sing just as well as Beyonce. But then it's everything that goes underneath that, from work ethic to team that's surrounding, so it's all of these things that's kind of packed into that thing that makes them a star. And I kind of feel like, it's that same sort of thing with picking people, with companies. It's the resilience piece is a big piece of it. And but same with you. You pick some great companies. Like, what's your process?
Well, it sort of depends at what stage, because I've invested at all stages, from very early stage, started companies, early stage, to what I spend a good amount of my time now doing, which is buying companies and applying a venture capital mindset to buying existing businesses. Maybe we'll circle back as to why I made that transition. When you're in the earlier stage, it's only about the people, because it's a big person and a plan, just like your Travis story. As you get later on, people are still a hugely important factor, but you have more data points to make your investment decision on, which I think is one of the virtues of going a little later, is it's not such a black box or is judgment oriented. You actually have something to analyze. And so it just really depends on the stage. But I do think there are these intangible traits that you find, whether it's a musician, whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's a tennis player or a sports star or a politician. There's something intangible. Because as you said, a lot of people have talent, a lot of people are smart, but who's really willing to work? Who's willing to overcome the obstacles that we all face And how do they surround themselves? What are their values? And what do they want out of life, you know? I tell you one thing, any entrepreneur says, I'm doing this because I want to be rich, that's the end of that conversation, right?
Yeah.
I always say if you start a company because you want to make money, that is not nearly enough motivation to overcome the inevitable troubles you're going to have, right? But if you're like, I'm doing this because I want to change the world, there's a need for what I'm creating, when things are really bad, which they will be at some point, that's a motivation that's going to let you overcome those things.
Anything that I really made money on wasn't because I was trying to make money on it.
Right.
That looking back, it's not because I went into it with the intent of making money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? What obstacles have you overcome? I mean, you must have had lots. We all have had lots.
You know what? I think it's kind of that idea, specifically in most urban neighborhoods in America. It's kind of like the starting line is here out of the gate,
Mm-hmm.
and so I came up in Southwest Philly and loved music from the very beginning. But really didn't, nobody in my family had ever done music or been in the music business or anything like that before. So I think first obstacle is getting over the sort of internal doubt within your own family, because it's like, to kind of take this non-traditional road and everybody's telling you you're crazy and that's not going to work and get a real job with benefits and benefits is big in my house.
By the way, it's the same in mine. When I left the Carlyle Group to start my own fund, my mom was like, are you sure you want to leave? And she's like, are they going to be mad at you? And I was like, Mom, you got to worry about me. Don't worry about them. But we all face, and you can't underestimate the pressure of how Mom's going to feel about you.
Yeah.
Right?
I dropped out in 11th grade and watched my mom literally cry. And she tricked me one day. She took me, I forget where she told me we were going, but it was like 46 and Market. We go, and I walk in and I see this, this big sign that says Job Corps. And she sent me off to Job Corps.
Oh, gee.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is like jail meets college.
Is that their tagline?
That might as well be the tagline, right? By the way, it was like the most beautiful pictures of these facilities, and it's like, you get there and it's like this old abandoned Navy base in like Port Deposit, Maryland. But it was like, that disappointment of, because she was a very hard worker. So, and she raised 3 boys by herself and, every single day, 5:30 a.m. So for me to drop out of school was probably, that was like the throwing it in her,
Sure.
everything in her face that she worked for or whatever.
Yeah.
So in telling her I wanted to be in the music business, I might as well say I want to sell crack. And so getting over that part and then getting over the you versus you,
Right.
that sort of competitive thing, the self-doubt, that's the toughest part.
Yeah. And what about later in your career, once you got started? Because you must have faced some things, some setbacks along the way, right?
You know what? It's funny because the beautiful thing about hip hop music, and I kind of came up through like the sort of birth of hip hop and late 80s, early 90s as the entrepreneurial side was starting to emerge. It's nobody looked at your background. Nobody looked at, what school you went to or anything like that or whatever. And most of the guys in the space had similar backgrounds to me, so it wasn't a bias. It was more about your ears. Like, could you hear it? Could you pick? And that's what it was about. And then as I got into more the corporate side of it, I think that's when I kind of started bumping up against things and going from hip hop to pop music and managing. When I first started managing Gaga, there was probably 2 or 3 black managers in the world that managed global pop stars. You know, myself, Jay Brown, who manages Rihanna, and Matthew Knowles, who was Beyonce's dad. And so you can definitely see the bias once you got on that side of it. So that was a bit of a challenge, kind of having to prove myself and within that space.
How'd you prove to her that you could do it?
She didn't care. She just wanted to win. Like that's it.
Yeah.
So
Just because that was your first big thing, right? So
it was the biggest. It was like it's like if you had Warby Parker in your portfolio and then you got Uber. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
It's like,
Yeah.
so it was some big things.
Yeah.
But then it was, really
Next
big
thing,
things,
right.
right? So, but what I credit that experience to, it definitely raised my profile in the music industry because people kind of box you in. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure in your career, people thought you
Yeah.
were one thing, and then
Yeah.
you got to prove yourself going into the next thing.
Yeah.
So I think, we did a lot for each other in a sense of being able to, as much as I built her career, her success helped build my career.
Yeah. How'd you just talk about how you discovered her?
That was through actually a buddy of mine from Jersey, Vincent Herbert. But those entrepreneurial moments, and I don't know if you've been there, but prior to me signing Gaga, and I probably took one of the biggest hits of my life. Kind of, I had sold my business, stayed on with the new company for a couple of years after I sold it, and left to start a new company, invested everything into this new company, and my main client fired me, and after I hedged everything. So I ended up like going as close to bankruptcy as you could possibly get in 2007, like 2006, 2007. And, moved out of my offices and like started from scratch. And Vince, my buddy from Jersey, called me and said, I got this girl I'm bringing to town that, I want you to meet. And it ended up being Gaga. Then, so it took probably a couple of years from the time I met her to that first moment that you kind of know that, okay, this feels really good. It feels safer. It feels safer than it felt before.
Yeah.
So it's about a 2-year period.
And what did you see in her then?
Going back to the comparison to Travis, right? It's clarity of vision. So, one, the songs that she played, were hit songs, but
let's just describe. So when you're seeing her, describe where are you going to see her?
So she came into the office, and Will Smith, who's been like mentor, big brother, everything over the years. I was in their space, and she came into the office, and she was Gaga walking into the office.
Dressed?
Yeah.
Like now?
Now.
Like wearing
but black
like
hair.
wearing meat and stuff?
I mean,
Not that
she couldn't
outfit.
afford meat
Not
back
allowed.
then.
Okay.
This is it. She couldn't afford meat back then.
Tin foil, something like that, right?
Exactly. And but she was a star, like because it is so hard for all of the pieces to align, because some people come into the office and they may look like a superstar, but the music is terrible.
Yeah, right.
You spend all that time working on your
Yeah.
hair and makeup, and you couldn't write a good song, right? or they can sing, but they, it's like they don't have the image and or the personality, or they're lazy. Like lazy is probably I get that more than anything else. Yeah. So it's really hard for all of those pieces to come together.
Yeah.
And for a developing artist, she was the closest that I've seen to together. But the piece, and this is like that sort of Malcolm Gladwell, those theories, right?
Yeah.
She had just gotten dropped from Def Jam Records 4 months before I met her. And so, she kind of worked all her life to kind of get to this point. It's like a kid, I want to, a tennis player. You go through all that training as a kid, and the whole thing, your dream's Wimbledon, right?
Right.
And so her dream was to get a record deal. she gets this record deal, and a few months into the record deal, L.A. Reid, who was running Def Jam, decided to drop her from the label. So it was
Oops.
devastating. Devastating.
For who? For her, for LA.
For LA much later. By the way, me and LA are like this now, and it's like, he's like, Troy, I was questioning my ear for years after that. But he signed Justin Bieber and Rihanna and made it up.
He bounced back.
But that's a bit of a bounce back. It's like not investing in Uber when it's at 200 million.
Yeah. Bounce back.
But you know what? But going back to that theory, I think a lot of it had to do with her getting dropped from Def Jam made her work harder and made her appreciate it more.
Yeah.
And I could see it every single day, like every day. The other thing about her is she studied the greats.
Yeah.
And only the greats study the greats.
Totally.
In
everything.
Yes.
In everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
And I think all of that kind of led to, you know, her becoming who she became. And to be honest, I think she's still at the beginning stages of what she's going to become.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think people don't, everyone always looks at the success and don't fully appreciate the road to get there. I mean, when I started my firm, I was at Carlisle, as I was saying, had a great job, prestigious place. It was still pretty early there, and I decided I wanted to go do my own thing. And
like, what gets you to that? Like, how do you become brave enough to leave that title? Because you become Mark from Carlisle at that point, right? Like, how do you what gets you there to
So and that was always the doubt, is like, are you Mark from Carlisle or are you Mark Hine? Like, I don't know. And I actually was pretty good at finding deals and had a really good string of success there, and had started a few things from scratch that became worth billions back in the late 90s, which was a lot of money back then. And still not bad, but now it needs to be tens of billions. But and the firm when I got there was small. There were 30 people total, like 12 professionals, and at that time it was hundreds of people and getting bigger, and I wanted to be in a small environment. And I had a lot of confidence I could be an investor, and I actually had a lot of confidence that Mark Hine would do as well as Mark from Carlisle, that the deals I was doing I knew were helpful because of the business card, but I'm like, you know what, I can do this. But what I didn't know, because we launched the firm, there was an article in the Washington Post, big hoopla. First night, I go to my new office, and again, I had total confidence in all the investing side and all that, but I'd never been the person responsible for my investors, my employees, my landlord. I mean, every person which I never had. And so I go to the office, and I was like, work like a dog, go home, go to bed at a pretty good hour. 3:30 in the morning, I wake up in a cold sweat. Like, and I'd never had a cold sweat. I didn't know what it was, but I was cold and I was sweating, and I was like, this is what a cold sweat is. And so I couldn't go back to sleep. There's some massive anxiety I'd never had in my life. And I went to work early the next day because I couldn't go back to sleep, and I was so tired. I went to bed that night, and I was like, thank God I'm going to get back to sleep. 3:30 in the morning, cold sweat again. For most of 2 months, I literally woke up in the middle of the night. I never forget that. And it had nothing to do, because I know there's a lot of people here who work at firms or think about doing your own thing. It was so interesting. Again, total confidence on the investing and deal side. It was just like now everyone's looking at me, and you know that as an entrepreneur. The difference between doing things when someone else is taking care of those things and it's you and the whole world's looking at you, especially investors and employees mainly, is it's a frightening experience the first time you do it, you know. So, but I got through it eventually, and then it was sort of in the first tech wave, and everything we did worked out fantastically, and I was like the smartest guy in the world, and then the world fell apart, and I was like the biggest idiot in the world. And then we sort of rechanged our model, and I dusted myself up, and we turned it into a really good success and kept going. But you learn a lot from that. First of all,
Tell us a little bit about like that down moment. Like.
Yeah, well, the first thing you realize, I think, if you're a responsible entrepreneur, is you're never thinking about yourself. Like, I don't think once I thought about my investment, my career. You're just like, oh my gosh, all these people are looking at me. It's my investors, it's my employees. Again, it's all the stakeholders I'm responsible to them first. And so that's the first thing. And then secondly, you just realize you just have to put one foot in front. You can't panic. And you know you're not getting out of it in a day. You just put one foot in front of the other, and day by day you start to work it out. I actually went to my investors because we hadn't invested that aggressively, and I said, if you guys want your money back, I'll give you everything and I'll work on the rest. And actually, to their credit, they said, look, we believe in you. This wasn't your fault. This was the world fell apart. This world fell apart. And there's no one we'd rather have invest at this stage than you, so figure it out. And from that, we changed our model a bit from solely early stage investing to buying existing companies, which I had also done, and applying a venture mindset to it. So I thought the previous panel was really interesting, talking about how as an investor, whether you're venture or private equity, you need to be creative and entrepreneurial and think about your model and what the sweet spot is and how you de-risk things at time. The venture business, when you're finding Ubers and Lyfts and Warbies, is the world's greatest thing, but most people in the venture business, that's not their experience. You know, it's hard. And
we know how to bury our dead.
Yeah, and most people never get one of those. It's hard. So I was like, how am I going to re-engineer this business? And I was like, look, if I can buy a company and help accelerate its growth, roll up my sleeves just like it was a venture-backed deal. And by the way, I can buy it with leverage. So, you know, I can buy a company for $100 million and put in 20. And if I double the value of the company, I've made 6 times my money. I've doubled the value of the company from 100 to 200, but I only put 20 in. It's worth 120. I've actually made 6 times my money, right? And if I take a venture company from 100 to 200, I've doubled my money. And by the way, I've had all this risk that I'm running out of money along the way, and I'm always worried about where the next funding's coming from, as opposed to like, wow, that's a whole set of worries and focus me or the team don't have to focus on. So we did that, and especially then there were a lot of good companies you could buy at pretty good prices, and that's what we did, and we dug ourselves in and had a lot of success and turned it into something that worked really well.
That's great.
Yeah, and that's what we do now today. Oh, we do both. I mean, we do early stage, but I really do think just being thoughtful about where you're spending your time, the areas, the model you use. If you're blessed to be in the deal flow where you can find big successes or in a firm where that's happening, it's the most rewarding business in the world. But if maybe you're not, there's a lot of ways to also do great stuff, help build companies, earn great returns for your investors, and do well for yourself and your family.
Like, how do you just, in terms of like centering yourself, right? You know, because you got a lot of moving pieces. Like, how do you get into the center? How do you get into the zone?
So I'm a believer. You have to like working 18 hours a day and sleeping 6 is not a formula for success. So everyone has their own things that let you find that quiet time, right? So for me, it's working out, it's going for walks, it's plane rides, it's just finding the time. And that's where all the great ideas come from. You know, you go for a run and all the stuff that comes out, or God, nothing's more productive than when you're on a plane and you don't sign up for GoGo, you know, and you're not online. And it's like forced thinking time, which we never get, right? And then the list that comes out is unbelievable. My office, I send them an email like, oh my God, please sign up for GoGo next time. We don't need all these to-dos. But I really believe that. I believe that to be the best you can, it's not about working hardest, it's working smartest. You need to find downtime, you need to find reflective time. And I also think you need to find joy. Like a lot of people just work and work and work, and they never have a good meal. They never go to a concert. They never go to a sporting event. Because they just are like, I got to work. And I just think work's hard. And if at some point you don't inject a little joy, you don't spend time with your friends or family, you know, I don't think you're going to, first of all, you're not going to be happy, which is the most important thing. But I also don't think you're going to be as good as you can be if you find joy every day in something.
I got two more questions, bro? Okay.
Yeah, then we do Q&A, so we still have more time.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I had 2 questions, and I'll put them together. Entrepreneur Hall of Famers. So if you had to pick 3 entrepreneurs, I'll make it easy. You start in 5, if you had of all time for entrepreneurs, and then top 3 books you've ever read.
Are you going to answer the same thing?
No.
Yeah, no.
It's for you.
I mean, sounds so trite. I'm actually having dinner with him tomorrow night, which I'm thrilled about. It's Jeff, you know what Jeff Bezos has done. So Warren Buffett said Jeff Bezos is the greatest business person of all time because he built two of the greatest businesses ever that have no connection to each other, right? So like a lot of people have done multiple things, but they're related in some way. Like he built the retail part of Amazon and the Amazon cloud that actually have nothing to do with each other, and two of the greatest businesses of all times. And obviously, you know, he is for sure in the middle innings of, and the only thing that's going to stop him is the government at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an immovable force. So you have to you have to include him. You know, to my model, I mean, these are so trite and common, but Steve Jobs, like just taking, obviously starting it, but then that whole story about coming back when it was kind of down and out and doing what he did. And, you know, back then people forget that everyone was like, well, Microsoft's the genius, they have the open platform, and everyone's like, the thing that had killed Apple was that they controlled the whole ecosystem and they didn't let other people, and they said that's why DOS and Windows is the dominant one. And he didn't come back and go, I'm going to change to that. He's like, no, that's still right. It's just how you execute it. And he built Apple. I could keep going, but we go. But there's two great ones, and more importantly, why?
And two books. Give me one or two books.
Oh man. Well, his book. I loved his book. So that's it. I don't know. I'd have to think about the other one.
that's good.
All right.
So we have our first two questions on this card, and then I'm going to go collect the cards from everybody else in the audience.
Did you find joy after you became a millionaire? That's such an interesting question. No. It's no. It is better, but no. No. Honestly, I think personally I've been the same set of values as always, and had that same mindset along the way. It does take the pressure off, and I recognize that and feel blessed that, you know, the pressure of having enough to support your family is gone. That takes a lot of pressure off. But one thing that I think is so important, and there's a fantastic scientific study, and I would tell you empirically and anecdotally from my life, I'm sure you'd say this, money and happiness are not related. So there's a scientific study that once you get above the amount of income to have food, shelter, and the basic needs in life, there is no correlation between money and happiness. And I'm sure you feel the same way. I know more rich people who are unhappy people in the world. And I know a lot of people who are doing fine and are the happiest people in the world. If you ever define yourself by money and how much money you have, that is like the surest path to being an unhappy and unsuccessful person.
Yeah. For me, it was, I remember like the first, when I crossed that mark, it was right at when I sold my company. Like I made money and it done okay, but it wasn't it wasn't one chunk of money at one time, right? I was hood rich. And best car on the block in West Philly, hands down, right? But I remember checking you know how you could call I called the bank to make sure the money was still there, and like listen to it a couple times, like call back a couple times.
Yeah.
And but 6 months into working for the company I sold for, I lost my joy. So I went from being in the music business and living my dream as this kid who always wanted to be in music to working for a company. And it was like no joy in it, and I hated it. And I felt myself going into this spiral or whatever. And my whole thing was, I'm giving the money back. I want to buy this company back. And I realized, that was the point where I realized it wasn't a connection, it's like zero connection between the two. And the other thing it made me realize, like the example that me and one of my close buddies talk about is like making $1 million is like having a 40-point game in the NBA. It's like you realize you can do it at that point or whatever, But the challenge is you got to go out and do it again the next night
Yeah.
and the next night. And, what becomes your average? So it gives you the confidence that you can go out and do it or whatever. But it's like it's up to you at that point to keep up and keep going.
That's true.
Yep.
I remember actually, I went to school in West Philadelphia. I went to Penn, and I never forget this. Ted, Quakers. Ted Turner came and spoke, and I'll never forget this huge auditorium of people when Ted was at the top of the world, founded CNN, Turner Broadcasting, everything else. And he tells a story about his dad. He's like, my dad was my hero, and my dad was a great businessman. I always wanted to be like my dad, and when my dad was 20, he set a goal to be a millionaire by the time he was 30, so he became a millionaire when he was 27. And then he's like, well, I got another 3 years. And he said, now I'm going to be, and I may get these numbers not exactly right, but he's like, I'm going to be worth 10 million now by the time I'm 30. And he's like, he was 29, and right before his 29th birthday, he became worth $10 million. And he goes, and then the next day, he shot himself.
Wow.
Like, literally, I get chills still thinking about it. But that's like, that lesson stuck with me my whole life. I'm like, if you define happiness with that goal, it'll never make you happy.
It was a story. I was in Philly. Philly was hosting at the Forbes 30 Under 30. I think it was 3 years ago. And we were at a guy's house. He had a dinner out on his patio, and it's overlooking all of Philadelphia, like the highest balcony, like beautiful place. And his dad, billionaire dad who sold his cable company to Comcast to help build out like that footprint of what Comcast ended up becoming. And at dinner, we're going around telling stories, and one of the things he said was he had never had dinner as a kid with just him and his dad. And his dad is like a philanthropist in Philly and like, big guy and everything else or whatever. And it made me think about what's important.
Yeah.
Like, I never want my kids, it's no dollar figure that you can put on your kids sitting at a dinner table.
That's right.
Because we get to that, we fool ourselves to say we're doing it for our families and, I got to go out and I'm working. You hit a certain mark and it's like, you don't have to do this, right?
That's right.
And that was another level setter for me. What do I want my kids saying across the table, when they're in their adulthood about my relationship with them,
That's really poignant. Yeah.
In your first meeting with an entrepreneur, new company, et cetera, what are you looking for and what major takeaway? By the way, this is a Job Corps education. You got me reading this. What are you looking for, and what major takeaways do you want? And what gets the second meeting for the entrepreneur?
Go for it.
I think the first meeting is easy. Like we Marlon's here, my partner Marlon's here. We kind of look at the company, the market. There's like a lot of things that who's the referral coming from before we actually want to take the time to meet with somebody. It's one thing to look at a deck or anything like that, but to bring somebody in and spend the time with them, we just feel like the company itself, the idea itself, the team, something has to be interesting enough for us to bring them in, right? And then I think the second meeting, you would have had to pretty much blown us away or gave us some sort of statistic about where you are to kind of get us to that second point. You got to get me out of the no, because automatically I'll kind of had a doubt, and if you can kind of bring me around from the doubt, and then Marlon knows, like I like to play contrarian a lot of times, just to kind of hear the other side of the argument and just kind of challenge the entrepreneur. So just kind of seeing what the argument is to kind of get me through the process.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think clarity of thinking and communication. Like when someone comes in, not that they're the most polished necessarily, but are they a clear thinker? Like have they thought about this? Have they thought about the kiss of death is, oh, there's no competition, right? There's no one, or underestimating that, which is amazing. You can't believe how often people think acknowledging competition makes you look weak, but it actually is the exact opposite. Not acknowledging the competition makes you look weak, because any good idea in the world, you are going to be hundreds, if not thousands of people trying to do it, so you better understand how you're going to deal with that. And then the other thing I always ask people when I'm interviewing them, but also goes for this, is what have you done in your life you're most proud of, or what's your greatest accomplishment? Because even if you haven't built a company before, which is fine, because a lot of people it's the first time, they did something, like there's something in their life where they really accomplished something. Could have been in school, sports, music, a job, anything, but just to hear something else that they did, and then more importantly, how and why they did it, is good, so that that they understand what it'll take to accomplish something when they have our money. Yeah.
And then one more in here. Oh, you got another one in there?
Take one more in there, and then this one's
This says, what traits do you think separates the studs from the duds?
The studs from the duds.
Studs from the duds.
Well, I think it's all the things that we talked about. I mean, I think it's all those things. It's clarity of thinking, it's leadership, it's determination. One thing is, if I ever write a book, it's going to be on resilience, because I think that's like the most it's not underestimated, makes people realize it, but that's like one of the most important traits. And the other thing, I actually saw Travis a month ago, and I was like, I'll tell you, every bit of strength I have that comes in work came from those 2 months of waking up in a cold sweat and overcoming it. And then a year and a half later, like being in the middle of the tech crash and trying to figure it out. Like all your strength comes from your bad times. Everything you learn, you don't learn that much actually when deals go well, to be honest, other than it's nice. But you learn a lot when stuff's not going well.
It's funny, John Zimmer, one of the founders of Lyft, is a guy that I would put in my top 5, and people don't know it yet. And, like he's gonna, granted they do what they're supposed to do, but, we invested, they were called Zimride, and they were like doing some car sharing from like dorms to campuses, and I think 2 years in, maybe 2 or 3 years in, they pivoted and started Lyft as a side product, because they said Uber, they have this high-end product, we're going to create a low-end product, and then UberX came after that. The near deaths, Travis is the most competitive guy I've ever met in my life. He's a people call him a shark, and now he's an orca. He's a killer whale. He kills sharks for a living, right? And but like just super competitive, and like seeing how the sort of gap that was, between the two companies, the amount of the competitive landscape, and like where it's public information, where Travis was basically saying, if you invest in them, if you invest in us, you can't invest in any other ride-sharing company. So everything that you could think of to kill this company, and not only did they survived with the same company culture and the same brand values. And like, so when you think, when somebody's in that sort of position, a lot of times you find out who they really are. And so when we talk about studs and duds, it's like, just because you come out of it winning doesn't necessarily make you the stud. But if you kept all of your brand values, your personal values, your company culture, grew the company, made your company money, it's like, to me, that's like, that says a lot. That's like the total package.
I agree with that. Yeah, that is a stud.
Yeah.
All right, last question. I actually think Amazon Retail and AWS are related. AWS started from internal experience of running Amazon Retail on an IT platform. I would love to learn your perspective about this. So my perspective on this is that Warren Buffett was the one who made the observation, and I would rather go with Warren on this one. So that's my perspective on that. Well, I've always wanted to be in business to make a difference. Like, it sounds corny. People are like, what do you want to do? Like, make a difference. I think, and so I've always balanced, even when I was an analyst at Goldman Sachs, I would go teach junior achievement. When you're supposed to be working 100 hours in the office, that wasn't really encouraged, let's say, at all. But I was like, I need to do a little bit of that. But I just think as you get further in your career, making an impact and giving back just on the balance of things becomes more important. Not that it always wasn't, it's just the more balance. And, you know, it's interesting because I always felt like along the way I need to do stuff. And then I read about Bill Gates, who's literally like, I'm not giving a penny away, I'm not spending 1 second until I'm done with Microsoft. And then I'm going to be the richest guy in the world. And then I'm going to spend 100% of my time doing the other thing. I never wanted to live my life like that, but there is a little wisdom in that. I don't know if you see, you know, there is, you got to focus. Focus wins. Focus wins in business. Focus wins in philanthropy. And lack of focus is really corrosive. Like, it really is. Like, you have a lot of good ideas, but you're not following through. So early in your career, I think, you know, you focus more on getting to where you have the luxury later on to where you can spend more of your time hopefully giving back and making a difference. How about you?
I'm aligned with that, and that's like a good segue. Like, you know, and like for me, success right now is really around my family. Like,
Yeah.
you know, specifically with, you know, my kids, and just, you know, am I providing an environment for them to thrive? You know, just as people. Because I think I'm learning a lot as, you know, we have 5 kids of all ages, you know, 4, 13, 14, 22, and 24. And what I'm learning from my kids about myself, by the way. And, you know, I think my 13-year-old put me through the biggest fucking challenge about myself this morning. I'm like, he's testing my meditation right now. My wife's calling me on the phone from LA. Talk to him. And but you know, I think just making sure, like making sure my family is successful right now. I think that's like a big thing for me on a personal level. Yeah.
Me too. Get that.
Yep, cool.
All right.
Mark, thank
guys.
you, man.
That was super fun. I enjoyed that. That was great.